This is an Undiscovered Legacy production and proud member of Pod Nation Media Network.
Hello, Scoob Believers, and welcome to episode number 112 of the Undiscovered Entrepreneur. And it's me, Scoob, coming at you whatever device you happen to be listening on. Okay, just real quick, I have a really kind of excited announcement. I have something that I've put together, and I'm going to make the official announcement on my next podcast. But I want you to know that I've been working on something really hard, and it's coming out on my next podcast. So stay tuned for that. All right, so today's entrepreneur is a really, really good friend of mine. We've been friends for a couple of years, and I'm so glad to have him on the podcast, Gordon Firemark. Now, Gordon Firemark is a digital creative lawyer. He has lots of great experiences in the laws that we kind of don't think about in the very beginning of our entrepreneurial adventure, and things we really do need to keep in mind legally when we're just getting started. Now, in this podcast, we're going to learn the critical legal mistakes that could kill your business. Gordon shares real horror stories of his practice, including a podcaster who lost his trademark after 15 years because he waited too long to protect his brilliant brand name. Don't let this be you. Listen to this and you'll know how to prevent that. Discover the prenup business strategy that saves partnerships. Find out why most business partnerships fail and how Gordon's proven framework protects co-founders from costly legal battles that can destroy both friendships and companies overnight. And we get the inside scoop on intellectual property gold mines, understanding how our creative content, customer lists, and business processes could be worth millions in intellectual property value, and learn the simple steps to lock down ownership before competitors steal your ideas. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's listen to my good friend, Gordon Firemark. Salutations, Scoob Believers, and we are here again with another amazing entrepreneur. We are talking to Gordon Firemark. We've been following each other for a little over a year now. Gordon is into the law side of entrepreneurship, specifically in podcasting, but he has a lot of great knowledge in entrepreneurship and the laws behind entrepreneurship. So, hey, Gordon, how's it going?
It's going great, Scoob. Nice to be with you, man.
All right. Thanks so much for taking your time. I know you got a busy day to be on the Undiscovered Entrepreneur.
Happy to be here.
All right. So I kind of have a semi-serious question to ask you right here up front, okay? Are you a Scoob believer?
I believe in all things Scoob all the time.
Thanks, Gordon. That's awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Let's give our Scoob believers a little bit of a background, who you are and what your entrepreneur adventure is and how it got all let's give them a little bit about how it got all started.
Okay, well, as you said, I'm an attorney by trade. I started out down the path into the arts as a young kid, got very excited by live theater and always working behind the scenes doing that kind of stuff. Into college where I was going to study radio, TV, and film and come out of school and produce film and TV shows. The ugly idea of law school reared its ugly head my senior year in college. Around the time I actually finished college, got out and started working in the field, and then there was a strike. So that's when I decided to go to law school. But I've always had the spirit of creativity. I love working with creative people, and entrepreneurs are by their very nature creators, right? They create new businesses from the ground up. I speak creative, I guess is what I'm saying. I just enjoy the personalities, the work, and helping people bring a vision to life. That's what I've done. And as an entrepreneur myself, I saw as a lawyer in the practice, some people don't want to hire lawyers or can't afford to hire lawyers, but they've still got something important to say, something important to build. And so I found an opportunity. I've identified the opportunity to help those kinds of folks, podcasters, digital entrepreneurs, course creators, coaches, get the legal stuff done in their businesses for themselves with some help from me. So I've created some courses and templates and resources and things like that. And that's sort of my entrepreneurial. I love to educate. I love the sound of my own voice. Let's be honest. It's really rewarding to me to be able to help people at all levels of their journey.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because we, as entrepreneurs and creatives, we get so excited about putting something out there that's new, that's flashy, that we're really proud of. But sometimes we get so caught up in that we don't remember that there's a background to that we have to be careful about what we put out there and that kind of thing too.
Yeah, absolutely. The legal stuff, as I sort of lump it all together, is, I think, very important. It's the difference between professionalism and amateur hobbyism, I guess you could say. If you're serious about what you're doing, whether it's a side hustle or a primary business, you have to take it seriously and do the things that serious professionals do. And for that, that means thinking about a business structure, maybe setting up an LLC or a corporation, or at least documenting your relationships if you have partners and co-founders, things like that. But also with your team. Everybody on the team needs to be on the same page, literally, with a contract of some sort that identifies who owns what and who is entitled to what and what's expected of them and those kinds of things. And then, of course, when you're creating, you're making intellectual property. These are tremendously valuable assets. And so few folks in entrepreneurship world think about that stuff early enough on to really protect it and lock it down so they retain ownership. And then from there, you want to get paid. You got to have relationships with clients and customers and treat those professionally. So again, good contracts, good structures, good protocols, business-like practices. So that's kind of what I try to help folks do and get done.
Right, right. So when we're making stuff, you mentioned intellectual property. Can you,
Yeah.
just so we know what we're actually making that's intellectually property, can you kind of give us like a quick definition of what that is? So when we make something, we know that this is intellectual property.
Yeah. So intellectual property is a sort of an umbrella term, a category of law that addresses the protections and the protection and enforcement of rules relating to certain kinds of products of the mind. Patents covers inventions, new technologies and systems. If they're unique and not obvious, you can get some protection and hold on to the right to those things for 20 years before anybody else comes in and gets to use the same stuff. Copyright law protects the content we create, expression of the ideas that we put out into the world, whether that's in the form of a podcast episode or a video or a film or a poem, song, anything we write or create from if it's original with us, we own it. And we own it for a very good long time. And that's how you can monetize your creative work, I guess you could say. Trademark law is what protects the branding, distinctive names and titles and marks for things like Coca-Cola, Diet Coke, whatever. Nobody else gets to make a cola beverage and call it Coke because it's a trademark that is owned by that company. And that's an important kind of protection that we need to think about. And then there are the secrets, the recipe for Coca-Cola, for example. That's not just an apocryphal story. They really do keep it under lock and key, and only a very small number of people know exactly how much of what goes into Coca-Cola. That's so that nobody can exactly replicate what they've done. That could be true of your customer list or processes you use in your business or all those kinds of things. So those are the four areas: trade secrets, copyrights, trademarks, patents, that are covered by this area we call intellectual property. They can be tremendously valuable for business.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Good information. Thank you, Gordon. I appreciate that.
Sure.
So when we're looking at getting started, like a lot of my listeners are literally just getting started in their entrepreneur adventure.
Mhm.
What should we concentrate on first legally as we're getting started? I know it kind of depends on what kind of business we're starting, but is there any
Yeah.
kind of like starting processes we can kind of keep an eye out for?
Well, I think that structure is the foundation. You're building everything else on top of it. So you want to make sure that it's stable, solid, and not going to come out from under you at the worst possible moment. So thinking about, at least thinking about, is there a structure to be built? Now, a lot of folks do have to start up bootstrapping and they're just doing it on their own. They hang out a shingle, so to speak, and they are the business as what we call a sole proprietor. But if you have a co-founder, a partner, a co-anything in your business, it's really important to get that relationship documented in writing. In the podcast world, I refer to it as a podcast prenup, articulating who gets what if things don't go right, and how are we going to break it up if we break it up? Is somebody going to get to continue the business? Those kinds of things, because those are the most common pitfalls with new businesses. Is people get disillusioned with how much work is involved, or they're not making enough profit from it, or whatever, and so someone wants to leave, and then it becomes a pissing match, a fight. So some kind of a prenup. Better is the LLC format. So if you're starting a business, doing business, sooner rather than later, I think it's important to get it set up as a separate entity from your personal stuff. That's to shield you and your personal assets from the kinds of liabilities and risks that come in being in business, and vice versa, to shield the business from your personal liabilities. Imagine this: you've built this great business and you get in a car accident and the person is paralyzed and your insurance isn't enough to cover it all, so they come after your personal assets. And next thing you know, the victim, and it's a horrible thing, but the person who was hurt in the accident now owns your business. That's probably not what you want. So if you can keep them separate legally using structures like limited liability companies or corporations, that is a useful tool for maintaining the integrity of the business and its continuity in the case something changes, if somebody dies, those kinds of things. With a partnership or a proprietorship, if an owner is gone, company's gone, and it has to sort of start over. Not always that hard, but yeah. So I think the entity structure is the important first consideration. Well, after, I should say, that's a first consideration after you've sort of figured out what's the plan for this business. What's the problem our ideal customer has that we're going to solve for them, and how are we going to deliver that solution? And that may mean that your contract with your client actually sort of comes first because you're bootstrapping and starting something sort of off the cuff. So it sort of does depend on what you're doing and how you're doing it.
So from what I made to understand, the most common one is the LLC. I mean, that's the one I went for.
Yeah, corporations are an older form of business entity. The invention of the corporation goes back to the Dutch East Indies Corporation when they were doing shipping around the world, and each ship was its own corporation so that if one ship went down, it didn't sink the whole business. Those kinds of things. And it was also a way to bring in investors and spread the risk and the wealth across things. But they became a little unwieldy to operate in some instances. There's a lot of hoops to jump through with corporations. And so the LLC is a newer, just started in the late 80s, a newer kind of entity that most places in the US anyway recognize, and a lot easier to operate. It's basically just a contract between the owners and the company.
It's kind of hard for me to hear the word late 80s and newer in the same sentence. So I'm just still trying to figure that out.
Well, I was in law school in the late 80s,
Yeah.
so I was a full-baked adult by that point. So.
Oh, man.
But, in the scheme of things, when we're talking about hundreds of years, 80s is just 50 years ago.
Yeah.
40 years ago.
All right. So also, and something that came up for me too when I was just getting started too is applying for a fictitious name.
Yeah.
And I know that kind of depends on the state, but can you give us a little more insight on that?
So if you are, what this is about full disclosure and making it possible, transparency, making it possible to find the owner of the business if somebody wants to sue, if there's a reason to be in contact. Now, when you form an LLC or a corporation, you don't need, if you're doing business under the name of the company, you don't need to file a fictitious business name statement, also sometimes referred to as a DBA, doing business as, because the corporation itself or the LLC itself is registered with the state, so it's possible to track down who is behind it. But if you're doing business as a proprietorship or a partnership, and you're calling the public-facing business is not named the same as the company, then the public has a right to know who's behind this. And the usual way is you file a certificate with the county that tells them these are the people who own this company and how to reach us and so on. And then most places, I think they require you to publish it in the newspaper of widest circulation a few times over a course of a few weeks so that it's searchable. So there's records out there for people to find if they decide they want to come find you. And usually there's a modest cost for filing the DBA. It's much less than filing an LLC or something. And I think it renews every few years. Someplace it's like every 5 years.
Awesome. Now, when we file for an LLC, do we necessarily need to have a lawyer? I'm sure it's a good idea to have a lawyer to help you with an LLC or applying for anything when it comes to that. But when it comes to LLC, do we absolutely have to have a lawyer?
No, it is possible to file an LLC yourself or to use one of these. I use the vending machine metaphor, the online services where you put in your money and you answer a few questions and it spits out a plain vanilla basic LLC or corporate stuff and gets the things filed for you. The truth is, if your company is plain vanilla, that works fine. I also say, would you stick your head in a vending machine that said haircuts $1, put your head in the, if you've got a normal perfect head, maybe it's going to come out just fine. But if not, maybe you wind up missing an ear or something like that. That's sort of how I liken it. Having a lawyer is more about strategic thinking behind the creation of the entity. It's not just, oh, I need to form an LLC, but you want some advice and how to run things and how does it all fit into the plan. And then there's the maintenance, keeping on top of what has to be done each year for the company and those kinds of things. So as a lawyer, I'm certainly in favor of hiring lawyers to do these things, but I get it. Sometimes you have to navigate budgets and things.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's okay. So we have our beginnings, our starts, we have our LLC put together. What would technically be our next step from there?
Well, if you're running a business online, that is having websites and doing, well, certainly if you're having a website, you have to have a privacy policy on your website. So the website documents, it would sort of be the first order of business, because once you put up that website, you are out there to the public, and you want to make sure that you're complying with the privacy laws that require there be a privacy policy disclosing what information you gather and what you're going to do with it and those kinds of things. But also the terms of use of your website. This is the contract between you and your visitors, and it outlines what they can and can't do with what they find on your website. And often you include disclaimers and things like that as well, saying don't rely on the information you find here without doing your due diligence, those kinds of warnings. And then the actual transaction contract, if you're selling something online in e-commerce, you have rules about how you collect payments and things like that, but also what do they get, the deliverables, and do they have a refund policy? All of those things need to be in writing, very explicitly, clearly laid out, so that customers and clients know what to expect and don't come at you asking for things they shouldn't be asking for.
Right, because it's all outlined there. You could just point
Yeah.
at it and say, this is where it was at.
Yeah, and oftentimes the credit card processors, if they get a complaint from a customer, they just give them their money back, pull it back out of your bank account, unless you can show them very clearly, no, they agreed to this, and I've done all of these deliverables. So you just want to be armed with as much backup for those kind of situations as you can.
You know what I'd like to hear, Gordon, is a
Yeah.
story from you about how you had to experience some of these things for yourself as you were getting started. I mean, do you have any kind of experiences you could talk about?
Well, I fell into the no refund policy trap myself early on with some of my courses. And I had somebody come back. I think I said it was a 30-day refund policy or something like that. And it was 45 days in. Someone came and asked for the refund, and I told them, your 30 days is up and you sort of missed that opportunity. What can I do to make it right? And next thing I know, I got a charge back from the credit card, and that put my bank account into overdraft status briefly. And it's embarrassing, if nothing else. So you can bet I went out and wrote a rock solid refund policy right away. And I've had the situation with a collaborator where we ended up having a bit of a disagreement about ownership and division of proceeds and how we were going to calculate the profit, what expenses were coming off the top and things like that. And we worked that out without too much trouble, but, sort of made me wish I'd had a prenup in place before that. And so, yeah, some of this is learned from experience, but a lot of it is also just learned from case study work as a lawyer. You read a lot of cases about people who've had it a lot worse than I could ever expect. So, and you want to try to help people avoid those.
Yeah, definitely. We got to take those extra steps so we understand we can kind of watch our backs, as it were, as we're going along in our entrepreneur adventure, to make sure that these things are covered, because they're very important. Things like the LLC, like taxes. I mean, that's definitely something we have to worry about as entrepreneurs, the taxes that we have to deal with.
Yeah. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a tax advisor, but if you're not planning for your taxes, you're planning to get hit with taxes harder than you like. That's something to definitely think about. Talk to a professional who can give you some advice about that as well. But one of the things that I want to say about all this and getting your legal stuff done really is the most important thing you can do to sort of position yourself for growth and success and profit and achieving the kind of impact and influence that you're after. I had a client who, in the podcasting space, who had chosen a brilliant title for his show. This is the brand that he puts out there to the world. And it was great. It sort of captured the imagination. It had a sort of triple entendre kind of a meaning in the name, very buzzwordy kind of a thing. And he was podcasting for 10, 15 years or something like that before someone else came into the marketplace and adopted a brand that was very similar, used that same buzzword, captured a similar impression. And he came to me and said, what can I do? How can I stop them? And I asked him, did you register a trademark? And his answer was no, he hadn't bothered. He had waited all these years to protect the brand of his show and his whole company. So we quickly hustled to go file a trademark registration, just to at least get that taken care of. Better late than never. But unfortunately, in this case, it was too late, because they had already registered their title. And they hadn't even launched a podcast yet, but they had registered it on what's called an intent to use basis. And once that goes through, you get an opportunity to extend it for several years before you have to either fish or get off the pier. So they never did launch their show, but it took 4 years of us waiting, arguing with the trademark office to get them to give my client his trademark so he could prevent this from happening again in the future. Finally, it all said and done, but at what cost of time, energy, headaches, and money, of course. We could have gotten it done much more easily had we done it early on in the game of things.
Right. And that's a very, very good example of getting these things done probably right up front. Like you said, the other company got it before even the podcast went out.
Right. Biggest mistake is waiting too long. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So don't take your time. Don't dilly-dally. Do it, as soon as you get a chance to do it, do it.
Yeah.
I know you've probably heard a couple of my podcasts, and we do talk about. I'm going to change gears here a little bit. We do talk about the 4 hurdles of stop, which is imposter syndrome and perfectionism, failure, and fear. And I know you've come across many, many new entrepreneurs that are just getting started because that's what you do. The law side of things is help people get started in that aspect. And which one of those things do you think you experience most, if not for other people, but for yourself too?
Well, I think fear is the big one. I mean, I think imposter syndrome is a kind of fear. I think perfectionism is also, a manifestation of a kind of fear. What was the fourth one?
Failure and fear. Yeah.
Failure and fear. Yeah. So, all of those sort of stem from a root cause of being afraid of either being exposed as a fraud or as just not being who you're putting out to the world, or of just not achieving things, and then the embarrassment and shame that might come with that. So I think the fear that prevents us from putting it out there in the first place. We have to be bold, we have to be brave, and take big action, even at the risk of being embarrassed, exposed, or losing money or whatever else. That's what business is. That's what entrepreneurship is risk taking. And bold, decisive action in the direction of your goals will always move you closer to those goals than sitting on your hands doing nothing. One of the premises I will put out there is that when you have your business and legal and the kinds of things I talk about taken care of, squared away, your business affairs in order, you feel more confident taking those actions. It bolsters that sense of, I don't have to be afraid of this because I'm protected, or I don't have to be afraid of this because I've done the right things and I'm putting a professional foot forward. So it all plays together. You get rid of the fear by confronting it and doing what needs to be done to, if it's imposter syndrome, you make sure your credentials are up to par and that you actually do know what you're talking about, and remind yourself of those things. When it's the legal stuff, it's, hey, I've got it squared away.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. I just want to touch on that a little bit because that is one of the main subjects of the podcast. I just wanted to see what your take was on it, since it's kind of a different visual aspect of it, because it's kind of on the law side of things more than anything else.
Yeah.
So if you were to come across a new entrepreneur that was just getting started, would that be your first piece of advice to them, was to get their law stuff in order?
I'd say it's the second piece of advice. I think having a business plan, having a business and a marketing plan, really knowing who you serve, what problem they have that they want to solve and are willing to pay to solve, and then offering them that solution and knowing how you're going to deliver it. That's the planning phase of things. I would say once you're ready to move beyond planning and into action, maybe launching a prototype or minimum viable product kind of thing is a first step. But yeah, I'd say put the legal stuff as a fairly high priority, especially if you're working with a team.
All right, good. That's good stuff. Here's a question I haven't asked in a really long time, but I like you, Gordon. You're an awesome guy. We've shook hands at Podfest and all that good stuff. What is one question you wish I would have asked you but didn't? I'm always missing one really good question that everybody's waiting for, but I just don't ask the question. Is there anything like that for you?
That's a hard one. People don't ask about my own priorities and how I run my business very often. And my answer to that question, I would say that my priority is my family. I love my wife and kids. I want to provide a comfortable environment and house for them and live a lifestyle we enjoy. And that's what drives my business. And I think it's important to always have in mind your vision for why you're doing this, because entrepreneurship is hard. It is not the easy path of go to work, work 9 to 5, come home, collect a paycheck. And when you get caught in the mire of things and the struggles of the business and the everyday and the stresses and things, it's really important to be able to remember, why am I doing this? Who am I doing this for? A book I read years ago talked about lawyers, and some lawyers would have a picture of their family on their desk, and some people would have a picture of the Lamborghini, and some would have a picture of the boat. And to a one, that was their why. This is why I'm doing this, because I either have this thing I have to keep alive and support, or I want this thing. And so, what's your Lamborghini?
There you go. I'm hoping that was a rhetorical question, because Lamborghini is definitely not high on the list there. Okay.
No, it is metaphorical. Yeah.
All right. So this is a tradition I have with all my guests. In the next 6 months, where do you see you and your company? Do you have a 6-month goal for yourself?
I tend to be not great at those kinds of long-term goal planning. I sit down each year, December 30th, January 1st, whatever, and I do try to write out a plan. And then most of the time it goes on a folder somewhere and I don't look at it again, probably till the 6-month mark or something like that. This year, I've actually put it in my calendar to look at it every quarter, and that helps. My next 6 months, or call it the end of this year, we're recording this on June 1st, right? So next 6, 7 months, I am shifting some things around in the business. I'm revamping the messaging. I've been reading the book Build a Story Brand 2.0, Donald Miller's stuff. And it's really changing the way I think about my customers and their journey and how I pitch things. The law practice is the law practice, and it hums along and it does nicely. And I'm not doing a lot of changing in there. But in the courses and templates business, I think there's a lot more I can do to reach more people and have a message that resonates better for them. So I'm working on my end of it, on me this time around, and how I convey the message of what my business is and who it's for.
Fantastic. That's good. That's really good. I've written Story Brand. I didn't know there was a 2.0. I think I've written the original one. That's a new one, yeah?
I think he came out with it maybe in the last year or so, and he's now built an AI tool to help you craft your story script and those kinds of things. And
oh boy, I'm going to have to definitely look at that.
that's pretty cool. Yeah.
All right. So, Gordon, in the next 6 months, I'd like to follow up with you with another episode just like this. And I want to curiously see how you've changed things around a little bit for yourself.
Okay. Sounds like a plan. I think my main goal is to try to get more people into the top of my funnel. And so when I run a webinar or something like that, I'd like to have more people registering. A bigger number at the top means a bigger number at the bottom line. And that's sort of the goal. So that's where all this messaging works. So hold me accountable.
All right. Yeah, you know we will, because you're not just accountable to me now. You're accountable to all the scuba believers out there that listen. No pressure.
Right on.
All right, Gordon, this is your time to shine. This is the time. Yeah, all right, this is your time to shine, Gordon. This is the time where I want you to advertise yourself. How do we get a hold of you? Where do we find you? And all that good stuff. Okay, ready, set, go.
Well, the central hub for all things related to what I do, GordonFiremark.com. That's GordonFiremark.com. That's where you'll find information about my courses and templates and things like that. The law practice is at Firemark.com, and social media, GFiremark, everywhere but Instagram, where it's Gordon Firemark. I'd love to hear from you. Reach out and let me know if there's something you're struggling with. If you have questions, I love to share my wisdom and knowledge and help folks understand all this stuff a little better. And I hope you'll check it out.
All right. Gordon, this has been an absolute treat. I really enjoyed talking to you and learning. I've learned so much about you and law and all that other great stuff we've talked about. Thank you so much for taking your time out of the day.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure, Scoob. Thank you.
All right. All right, Scuba Believers, make sure you stay tuned for the wrap up. Okay, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Gordon. Thank you, Gordon, so much for taking the time out of your day to be a discovered entrepreneur. It was great getting some of that legal information that all of us can really use when we're first starting in our entrepreneur adventure. But as usual, I do have a couple of takeaways on this. Your creative work is your fortune, protected like gold. Every podcast episode, video, course, or piece of content you create is valuable intellectual property that could generate income for decades to come. Stop giving away your future wealth by failing to secure trademarks, copyrights, and proper business structures that transform your passion into a protected, profitable empire. And also, fear is just success waiting to happen. Take bold legal action now. The difference between amateur dreamers and professional entrepreneurs isn't talent or luck. It's having the courage to invest in proper legal foundations that give you the unshakable confidence to scale big. When your business affairs are bulletproofed with LLCs, solid contracts, and trademark protection, you'll stop playing small and start taking the massive action that creates legendary success stories. With that, I'm going to say thank you, Scuba Believers, for another great episode. Make sure you stay tuned for the next episode where I have that big announcement for you. All right, Scuba Believers, thank you. Bye-bye.